Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lynn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lynn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lynn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I'm excited to say I've got a fabulous guest with me. Her name is Gia Lili. So welcome, Gia.
Thank you so much for having me, Lynn.
Gia is a love and relationship coach. And today we were thinking about talking around the subject of intentional about the way we show up in our relationships. So, Gia, please tell me how you got into the industry and explain to our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Of course. I mean, first of all, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Lynn, for having me.
That's really no problem at all. I love your energy, Gia, and I think we've got a lot of things in common and we're very in line with what we actually teach our respective audiences, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. And I loved when we got together, and this really ties in with, what I do and, why being intentional is really, really important and why I'm passionate about it as well. And when you and I got together, Lynn, in the first place, I really felt this synergy and about being intentional about the kind of relationship that we were setting up right from the start. And that's very much what I'm passionate about, and make sure that when I'm working with my single clients and also with my partnered and married clients, to make sure that they are connecting and being very intentional about the way that they're showing up in their relationships. Now, the reason why I care so much about this is because, just like many of us, we've been through heartbreak, we've been through situations where our relationships weren't necessarily a two-way thing, and maybe that was the way we were also showing up too, and maybe we weren't checking in with the other person as well. So, and when that happens, our relationships can fall by the wayside, and that's why I'm very passionate to make sure that both parties are coming into the relationship and coming at the relationship from a place of being very intentional, so that they can connect and that they can grow and they can maintain a relationship together.
So could you please explain to us, Gia, what would you, if you was actually asked what's the definition of being intentional, if somebody wasn't clear or sure, what does intentional actually mean? What would you say to that?
That's a great question. Really, this is about being mindful about who you are and how you are showing up within your relationship. That's how I would say being intentional. It's like, okay, so what do I want out of the relationship? Who am I within that relationship dynamic? What can I give? And also, what do I want out of it as well? And whatever it is that I want out of the relationship, what does it mean? Like, how do I need to behave in order to have what I want? So that all goes under the umbrella of being intentional about how we are showing up in our relationships and what we want out of it as well.
Excellent. I love the way you described that. It was very clear and concise. So thank you for that. I'm sure our listeners are very clear now about what the word actually intentional actually means in the context of relationships. And do you think that's different for romantic relationships against other relationships, or do you think that's the same?
That is a great question, because people do tend to differentiate between the different relationship types, don't they? Have you found that?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, to be honest with you, and the way that I see it is like, in every relationships, I believe we all need to be very intentional. And I also think that that's very important in romantic relationships and partnerships too. And unfortunately, I don't see too much of that, because somehow romantic relationships are seen as a different thing entirely. So they think they've got to behave completely differently.
Yeah,
In
that's
terms
very
of the way
true.
people show up. Yeah, I think so.
And I do think that some people probably get the word intentional mixed up with having expectations as well, don't they? Which they are two different things, isn't it? Aren't they, really?
Absolutely. And I love that you've raised that. Yeah, for sure. Yes, having expectations is definitely a different thing. And I think from what I've seen with the clients that I've seen over the years, having expectations can actually limit you. Because we can be very boxed in about the way that we think about things, the kind of things that we want. So we can be a little too rigid and not be as open and flexible to the way that how do we say this? About being flexible in terms of giving our partner or our intended partner the space to be who they are, like allowing them to grow. And leaning into that so that you're growing with them as well. It's almost like, it's an interesting one. I'm really trying to find the words, but it really is about moving with them and being accepting, for want of a better word.
Yeah, I think it is about accepting. Accepting who they are, obviously supporting them to be their best self, and within that, trusting that they'll support you to be your best self, but not wanting to change the other person, so they feel as though they're being judged.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you've said it that way, because you've just helped me to clarify exactly what I wanted to say. That's amazing. You see, I'm glad, because having this kind of synergy that you and I do, you are able to pick up on where I was going with this. So I love the fact that we have that.
Me too. Yeah, so I do get what you're saying, absolutely, because I do feel that without sort of wanting to put too much onus on women, but I do feel, from my own research and my own experience, that women do tend to more have the high expectations around what they want their partner to be like, and they're usually quite guilty of wanting to change their partner if he doesn't tick every single box, rather than giving that partner the space to be a better version of who they are and accepting him for who he is.
Yes, absolutely. And I love, again, I just love the fact that we are in resonance with one another and where we're going with all of this. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't planned or primed beforehand at all. We are absolutely here live off the cuff. So you can see this happening in real time. Anyhow, getting a little sidetracked there. I love the fact that you mentioned that, Lynn. And yes, unfortunately, we as women, and it has been researched and documented from a psychological level, that we as women do tend to be more perfectionist in terms of what we want from our partner, whether as opposed to the men. Let's say we are in a heterosexual relationship, and the man psychologically always thinks about, how can I be a better man? How can I be a better version of me? Right? Whereas with women, it's more like, well, how can I make him better? From almost from a critical standpoint, he's doing the best he can.
Yeah.
He's not worried about being perfect, but he's still making an effort. Whereas we as women tend to come into the dialogue, into the relationship thinking, oh, he's got to be perfect already.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that as well, energetically, men feel that as well, don't they? When we were judging them, or when we're sort of having those expectations that aren't being met, he feels that, whether you're verbalizing it or not.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of the common things I tend to say, and I think this has been affirmed in a one or two other podcasts as well, is that when men very often feel the weight of a woman's expectations, and that's not attractive to him. It's more likely to make him withdraw actually from the relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And men do feel the pressure. It's amazing how very different creatures men and women actually are. And I'm sure Your audience probably has come across, the whole men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing.
Yes.
And the truth of the matter is that we are very different. Our brains are wired very differently. I'm sorry, it's my neuro coach head on now.
Yeah.
We are very different. We are wired differently. We as women are more emotional. And that is not a criticism at all. It's our superpower, in fact.
Yes.
So we pick up on things that he hasn't even said.
Yeah, massively. And also, I think, in the name of equality, that word has been very much misunderstood in terms of, equality means equal opportunities. It doesn't mean being the same as men or vice versa.
Yes.
And, this trend towards trying to make everybody gender neutral means that, people are feeling like they're gender neutered, and then all that does is dampen the attraction and the passion, because we're trying to be all the same rather than embracing our differences.
Yes, I so agree with you. And it's true. It's true, ladies. I'd hate to say it, but it is true. And I'll be very, very honest here and say that once upon a time, and it's still there with me, but I'm very aware of it. But, when we are alpha females, for want of a better word, when we are in our masculine, when we are very driven, and we are in a male-orientated world, that kind of energy all the time can actually be very off-putting to a man.
Yeah, and then we wonder why, the real strong alpha male that we really want to attract, the healthy alpha male, the one that's very chivalrous, the one that's very passionate, the one that's very assertive, and the one that wants to lead and take charge of the relationship and really protect and look after you, isn't going to be attracted to that masculine energy, and this is what I educate women about is, you can let go of that masculine energy. If you need to use it, fine, fair enough. In a work environment, that no problem with that, but don't think, in a romantic sense, men are going to be attracted to that, or not the sort of man that you are looking to attract anyway. Right,
exactly. You don't want to bring that home.
I always say, don't bring, don't, when you come, or rather when you walk through the door, when you get home, is take the trousers off and give him his balls back, is what I normally say.
I love that. But it's true. It's true. No man likes to feel emasculated. Bottom line.
Exactly. And this isn't stuff that's taught to us. So don't feel if you're, somebody that's sort of resonating with being that alpha female in that masculine energy, that it's your fault. It's not your fault. Nobody's to blame here, but it is our responsibility to, once we've got that awareness, to check in with ourselves. And if we want things to change because our relationship status isn't what we want it to be, then, it starts with looking at ourselves and, and understanding this, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Awareness is the first step to everything, because then we have the power to change it.
And it doesn't need to be a huge, big step, does it? Once we have some awareness about this stuff, it's literally taking that first small step that can literally lead to a whole new destination. And I like to use the analogy, that if you're a pilot on a plane, just 1 degree off course, you'll end up in a different country, so you don't need to make a huge adjustment sometimes to attract what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that analogy. It's true though. Yeah, absolutely. All it can take sometimes is a mindset perspective. It's amazing when I've been talking to clients in sessions, and even my high performance ladies and gentlemen, because I work with men and women who tend to be high achievers, and when I'm talking to them and I say something to them in session, and suddenly the light bulb goes on and they're like, oh, I never even knew. I didn't even think of that. And they have these massive epiphanies. Sometimes, we just don't know what we don't know. A lot of the time we're not doing these things deliberately at all.
No, it's happening on an unconscious level, and certainly our modern society and education and parenting isn't conducive to helping us, attract healthy long-term relationships, is it?
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, especially the way that the world is moving so quickly now. We're like in a microwave society, and we do expect things to be happening fast, like now, the day before yesterday.
Yeah.
So I think we are also becoming less patient in the process too.
Most certainly. So can you give us then a perhaps case study where you've worked with a particular client around being more intentional and where they were before they had this awareness to where they are now, having gained this awareness for us, Gia?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Well, well, the ones that come to mind really, I find more than anything else is that when someone comes to me, they usually come to me for something else, and they come out with a lot more than they came in with.
Yes.
Meaning like they've taken away a lot more from the time that we spent together. Like they've come in consciously with, well, I'm finding it really hard to get a date, etc. Right? Or I'm attracting the wrong kind of people. What's going on? I feel like I'm doomed to be single forever, right? And then when we really break it down, we take a look at, and we've taken a look at their habits, their behaviors, the way that they've thought, even their history. And when we've really broken it down, we found that, okay, she's turned into a workaholic. She's holding herself back because she doesn't want to get hurt again. And because of that, she has created this kind of wall and now giving out this frequency, this energy of well, you can't approach me. I'm not approachable. I'm not emotionally available for a relationship. And then she's wondered why she's attracted people who are just after a bit of fun.
Absolutely, yeah. I get a lot of that myself, in terms of women that say, men are after one thing, they're just after a hookup or a friend with benefits or something like that. But then unconsciously, we're creating that for ourselves. We have got our own responsibility within creating that dynamic without even realizing, haven't we?
Yes, like you say, it's happening on an unconscious level. Nobody wants that.
No.
Let's rephrase that. Nobody intentionally wants that, and when we have been, and unfortunately I've seen a lot of cases whereby, I say cases, I mean situations really, because we are dealing with people, and the fact that we've all had pasts which aren't necessarily healthy from a relationship standpoint. And when we are healing and we're going through that process of healing, there are still issues maybe around trust, maybe around our own self-worth, maybe our own self-belief, self-confidence, things like that. When we're still working through those things, we're feeling vulnerable. And when we're feeling vulnerable, it's harder for us to show up, to be that kind of person or that kind of partner, to be involved in a long-term committed relationship, even if we want one, even if that is our deepest desire, to be in a loving, committed relationship. And that isn't happening because we're still carrying around the fears of what's been before, and we don't want a repeat performance. Of course, there's going to be a mismatch then, because our fears are overriding our true desire to be in a loving, committed relationship. So we've got to get ourselves back into alignment and in resonance of what we want.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And the two things that you mentioned that I'd like to pick up on, there's the word vulnerability and also the word fear. Now, for me, I personally know, that being vulnerable from a loving state is totally different to being vulnerable from a fear state, because if you're vulnerable from a fear state, in other words, you're in your head, then, you are going to be attracting unhealthy or unfulfilling relationships. Whereas if you're vulnerable from a very healthy state, you're certainly going to be very attracted then to a guy. If you're coming from a place of love and connecting to your heart, but then you're vulnerable from that place, it's totally different, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. And I love that you have made that very clear distinction there. It really is very different, from being in your head to being in your heart, and because when you're being vulnerable from a heart space, it's giving out the signal to that person, to the intended partner, that you trust them.
Yes. And it's very,
Sorry, please carry on.
Yeah, it can be very, very attractive to men, to see you being vulnerable from that heart love space, rather than, that healthy space, in other words, because rather than seeing it as a sign of weakness, it's only a sign of weakness if you're coming from that fear in your head space, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it adds to the attraction. But what I will say about that is just another thing about being vulnerable from a heart space and that space of trust. Now, hopefully, ladies, you'll be doing this from a place of where that guy has earned your trust already.
Yes.
Rather than just, pouring out your heart in any case. Make sure that he has been doing enough. He's been showing you the signs very clearly that he is trustworthy.
That's a very good point, because, again, women can be guilty, can't they? Like you said, pouring out their heart without really having been in a relationship 2 minutes and really knowing whether this guy is going to be that safe person to be vulnerable with.
Absolutely. And I say this from experience. I've got it horribly wrong, and it's been, and it's backfired on me, which is why I made that very clear distinction in terms of, that person having earned your trust before you can really be vulnerable in their presence, for sure.
And I actually do advise my female clients to, let the guy lead the relationship. And I know for some women, we want, like you say, in this fast food society, we want it yesterday. And women are usually more keen at times to move the relationship forward than men are. But I do feel it's very important to let the guy set the pace, and be prepared to be patient around that.
Yes. Yes, I think so. I think where the anxiety, if I may, really comes in terms of the women is that there are two things going on. For those of us who are very career oriented, we may have already spent the majority of our life in career, and now we're like maybe 38 to 40, and if we want to have children, that clock is ticking. So that may well be, one of the reasons why we want to move things along a bit quicker, to fulfill the biological aspect of having a family. That could be one of the reasons. The other reason could well be that if she has been in a relationship before and it's gone nowhere, and she's been very patient for 4 years, 5 years, whatever, and she's thinking, well, you sunshine, you better hurry up, because we ain't got time to waste. Then, and sometimes what can happen is that from the guy's perspective, if he is essentially taking too long and not really showing her that he is trustworthy and that there really is a future, then that can be a problem. So, and again, like we said earlier on, women, we, with our spidey senses, we know if he's dragging his feet.
Yeah, definitely. I think you raised some valid points in what you've just said there. And I feel that, sometimes, like you say, our hormones can betray us. You mentioned about the biological clock, and so then you're keen to sort of get settled down, because if you do want to have children, you just feel that your window of opportunity is going to be shortening very rapidly. But it's about having those conversations in a sense of that he's not feeling that he's just going to be a sperm donor for you. That he actually matters, rather than you need a father for your kids.
And that's a very important question, conversation to have, and a very important question to pose as well, because from what I understand and what I've seen, the onus seems to be on the women in terms of, this is what they want in terms of family. Who's asking the men about this?
Yeah. I agree. You know, these questions, like you say, need to be qualified right at the start. And, you know, don't be afraid to express what you want. You don't need to say, well, you need to marry me within a year, because that isn't going to work. That's going to make him run for the hills. But if you say, you know, what I'd really love in a relationship, and make them generalize it, is to, you know, within the next few years, settle down and have a family. You know, I feel ready for that. Then he can decide whether he wants to fulfill that role for you or not, you know, and he knows exactly what you want because you've expressed it.
Yes, exactly. And really, the first 2 years of a relationship is really easy. I say really easy like that. What I mean, it's much easier, just because of the way our hormones are set up, in terms of when we fall in love. In fact, did you know that it takes 0.2 seconds to fall in love?
No, I didn't know that. How would they have been able to measure that, I wonder?
I wonder that too, but you know, neuroscience and fMRI imaging is very, very clever. They've managed to pad it down to 0.2 seconds. It actually takes for you to fall in love. And I'll tell you why, theoretically, it's so easy to fall in love. It's because there are 12 regions of the brain which are dedicated to falling in love. So that's why it's so easy.
Oh, I love the science that you're bringing into this, because I've not heard this before. This is interesting.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. You know, when you're a neuro coach, you get to find out these things. So yes, so that's why it's easy for the first 2 years. You know, our hormones are very favorable, like we're in that in love stage, you know, what we call limerence. So that in love stage right at the beginning, like those hormones can keep us sustained for almost like 2 years, up to 2 years. So it's after that, when the hormones drop and die down, this is really when the couples are being tested and say, well, actually, do I want a future with him or her? Can this really go somewhere? Do we see ourselves together, like after those 2 years? So yeah, it's an interesting one. And that is when the effort actually comes into the relationship. That's when the real work starts.
It is, and it all starts, like we've been speaking about on and off right through, is around that word awareness, isn't it? You know, educating yourself around the information that Gia and I are sharing, so that you then can make the decision to either be responsible, take responsibility and do something new to change your relationship status, or decide, you know what, I'm just going to stay stuck and keep repeating the same old patterns of behaviour.
Yeah.
And it is as simple as that sort of choice, isn't it, for us?
It really is. It really is. It calls for us to make a choice. You know, either, as you say, either we stay as we are or we make a change. Or we've got to make a decision one way or another. Either way, it's a choice.
Absolutely. So on that note, Gia, thank you so much for sharing your pearls of wisdom. How can our audience members best get in touch with you? What's your best contact information?
Well, I love hanging out on Facebook, and if you just type in at Coach Gia Lili, which is CoachGialili on Facebook, you'll see my Facebook page come up. You know, I do videos and all sorts there. So, and you know, keep in touch with everything that I'm doing. So I post everything there. So you are more than welcome to connect with me there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gia. That's been a really, really lovely conversation. And as always, listeners, if you need to find out more about Gia and her other social media or contact information, that will be contained within the Hearts Entwined show notes. So thank you, Gia, for sharing your words of wisdom again. It's been really great. I've loved this particular episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
So on that note, listeners, I'll just wrap up with my normal true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lynn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lynn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lynn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.